I'd like to thank Paul for coming this morning and for all you have done for me while I was getting this conference going. You were wonderful, and we'll talk more after, but thank you very much for it. And he will do a nice talk on enculturation.
Yeah, clap before I start. That's the best way to do it. You'll be like, what? Thanks very much for having me this morning, Fathers. And as I said on Monday, welcome to Edmonton, welcome to the Archdiocese. We have never had warm weather like this until you all showed up. So our normal temperatures are, I think, are about 12 or 13 degrees. So thanks for letting us hit 27 the last few days. This morning, I know I'm probably with you for about 2 hours this morning, and I'm sorry I don't have I was going to say a PowerPoint. But hopefully this morning, I hope that we can sort of have a bit of a dialogue as well. The topic that we're talking about this morning is enculturation. And I'll share a little bit, just sort of a snapshot of the Archdiocese of Edmonton. But we have a lot of great wisdom in this room, because probably each one of us in our own dioceses are trying to do something, not only for our clergy to help us to be probably enculturated, but also our brother priests who are from away. And I think we learn a lot from them. So hopefully there's some best practices that we might be able to share together. And I know I spoke this morning with some of the priests to say, please, I hope you'll share your experiences in some of the discussions that we have. Part of my role in the Archdiocese is I am the vicar for clergy. And so over the last 4 years, we've been trying to look at different ways of how we can help not only our priests who are from away that are coming into the Archdiocese, but also helping our priests, our incarnated priests. And so we have a lot of our pastors who will often receive an associate pastor from away. How is it that we can help them? Because so often we need good mentors, not only for us older guys, but also for the newer priests. So I'll just begin by sort of giving a bit of a snapshot of what we see in the Archdiocese here in Edmonton. Probably for the better part of the last 60 or so years, a lot of the priests that come from other places would come to us from Poland, from Ireland. We had a lot of German priests here in Edmonton, the Palatine Fathers. Over the years, that has changed drastically. Then we would see a lot of priests who would come from the African countries. We had a lot of priests from Nigeria, from the Congo, from Cameroon. Now here in the Archdiocese, we have 2 priests, one from the Congo, one from Cameroon. We've just received a priest from Nigeria. And now all of a sudden, 2/3 of our clergy are coming to us from India. And when they come to us from India, many of them are coming from the Syro-Malabar or the Syro-Malankara rite. And of those priests, we have many of them who are also religious orders. We have the CFPC fathers, we have the CMI fathers. The CMIs are part of the Carmelite family, so the Franciscan family. We have seen a huge change, because one of the things that we have been looking at is when they come to here, when they come to Canada, you know, we try to set them up so that they're not showing up in the middle of December. It's a bit of a culture shock. I mean, it's cold for us in Edmonton. Those of you that have been here in the winter, it's hard for them. So we have been trying to set this up in a different way over the last several years. One of the things, and I know probably in your own dioceses it's going to be slightly different depending what province you're living in, is how do we get the priests here, especially through immigration? For example, just yesterday, Premier Jason Kenney announced for the first time that Alberta is going to change the way we receive faith leaders who come from away. This is a great thing for us, and I think this is Jason Kenney's last assist before he leaves office in a few weeks. He was the federal immigration minister, and we have been behind the scenes trying to work with him to be able to find a way where priests who are coming into the province of Alberta would eventually be able to get their permanent residency. And so he has just announced yesterday that they're making changes. Thanks be to God, because what we've ended up doing is we have actually sent our priests to neighboring dioceses in British Columbia and Saskatchewan, where they have a bit of that point program, which is never easy when we receive a priest and then after a few years we say, you know what, if you'd like to get your permanent residency, it'd be great, we'd be ready to help you and to welcome you, but we're going to ship you off somewhere to some far-reaching diocese, you know, and so that often usually takes about a 2-year or more process. And I must say, we're probably happy to do it. We're happy to lend a priest away. We never get a priest back from those other dioceses, though, you know, so you may face that as well, but we're happy to do that. We're happy to do that. But in a sense, we kind of feel bad because we're saying, here, could you take one of our priests so that we can help them stay in the country? Some of the things that we have been doing, and I'll sort of get more into this, is that in the last little while, and I'm sure in your dioceses it's the same thing, we have a package that we send to the bishop of the priest. And part of that is we've tried to beef that up a little bit. We want to get as much information about the priests that are coming as possible. One of the things that we never did until about 6 or 7 months ago is we never asked the priests before they came, what do you have degrees in? What are your interests? You know, we want to know your name, we want to know your age, we want to know your health and everything else, but we never actually asked questions about what do you like to do? We would have priests who come to Edmonton and they're serving our parishes, and then we kind of find out in a haphazard way, oh, Father so-and-so has a licentiate in liturgy. Why aren't we using you in liturgy? You know, we've got priests who have doctorates and all sorts of things. Why aren't we using you? You know? So we're trying to beef that up a little bit more in what we send to the priests that are coming here. Because when they come here, we can be using them. We have Newman Theological College, St. Joseph's Seminary. At the University of Alberta, we have St. Joseph's College. You're going to notice St. Joseph's is big in Edmonton. The cathedral, everything St. Joseph. One of our high schools, I think we just gave up trying to find names, everything in St. Joseph. But everything that we could do for those priests to get to know who they are benefited that relationship. A few years ago, when we started going into COVID, I kind of mentioned this maybe to a few when I was here on Monday, we had looked at what we were going to do with the Chancery office. We started with a staff of over 65 people at our Chancery office here in Edmonton, and we're down to under 30 people. And a lot of those are priests because we're cheap labor. And so we're kind of taking roles that we never had before. And what we did with Archbishop Smith is he wanted to look at what we do. So over the last few years, we've gone under this, what we're calling a radical rethink. I don't want anyone to think Archbishop Smith has kind of gone off the end or anything, but a radical rethink in how we are trying to do the things we do with less people, resources, and less money, really. And so part of that radical rethink has been how we are looking at our clergy formation and how we are looking at serving with priests who come from away. So over the last few years, we have been asking our priests, what are some of the things that we can do to help you and to make life better for you? We're trying to get away from the transaction to more of the relational sort of relationships and ministry. One of the things, and this is probably one of the big sort of priorities, is how do we strengthen the relationship between the Archbishop and the priests? This was something we had been looking at before that. When I think, and you may face this often yourselves, when people want to talk to the bishop, often if they're a little nervous, they'll go to someone maybe who's in the office or something and say, can you let the bishop know this? Go talk to the bishop, I always say. Like, he would love to talk to you. One of the things that Archbishop Smith started to do, and just before COVID hit, we started to do this, he meets with every one of our priests and every one of our deacons individually. So he actually invites them to his home. He doesn't do it at the office. They just book an appointment with his executive assistant, with Suzanne, and they go to the house. And they might spend however long together. And they just have a good one-on-one conversation. He'll ask them how they're doing, things like that. There doesn't have to be much business involved, but just to try to grow and deepen that relationship. That has been helpful, not only for our priests, but often for the priests that are coming to Edmonton from away, because often they don't know the Archbishop, and it just gives them a bit of a chance to be able to talk and to kind of share their life and often, hopefully, their struggles with him. I think Archbishop Smith and your own bishops, you know, they were priests too, so I think it's good for them to hear some of these things that often they don't hear. So Archbishop Smith is just continuing to do that. He's going to start that again this fall, just now that we can kind of meet probably more in person, so he wants to continue to do that. One of the other things that we had asked a lot of our priests about is what can we do in the sense of, for the priests that are coming into the Archdiocese. And so some of those things that we heard of was, they did not like the term international clergy. You know, we would often say there's our guys and there's the international clergy. They'd say, you know what, we're all priests together. So we've been trying to do away with that terminology to say, yes, we are priests together. Whether you're incarnated here or not, you come to serve. And you leave your family, you leave your friends, you leave your country, your culture behind, and you come to Canada. So that's what we've been trying to look at over the last several months. Every year in May, for 5 days, Monday to Friday, we go up to Jasper, to the mountains. And I must admit, we don't do much outside. We kind of sit in the basement of a hotel with no windows, much like this. And we kind of work on different things. Those are our study days. And so there we've been trying over the last 2 years to really see what we can do for our clergy, all of us together. And probably COVID has been a good help for that, because we're trying to look at a lot of the self-care things that we can look at for our priests. So a lot of them have been trying to say, you know, here's the gifts I have to offer. How can I offer them to the Archdiocese? So one of the things that we have certainly tried to do is, how can we invite them to be a part of a number of our committees? I have to say, we are reconstituting our Presbyteral Council right now, this very moment. Because one of the things that has come out of this radical rethink is that we need stronger deaneries. Because our deanery meetings would probably consist of who can come to my penitential in Advent, or who can come in Lent. There might be a few other things, and that would be it. So what we're trying to do now is change that deanery structure. And because 2/3 of the priests in the Archdiocese are really from India and other places, it has brought new life to our Presbyteral Council. Because so many of our brothers are now our deans and vice deans. We have 8 deaneries in the Archdiocese, 4 in the city and 4 rural deaneries throughout central Alberta. So our Presbyteral Council, our Council of Priests, is made up differently now. And thank God for that. So what we're trying to do this year, and if any of you are canonists, I know we're supposed to elect members to the council. We've actually appointed all new deans and vice deans this year. And we're going to start to stagger the terms, the limit terms, so that not everyone is coming in or leaving at the same time. But this has now brought a whole new wealth of experience to the Presbyteral Council, and really to our ongoing discussions and how we serve one another. So some of the things that we have been looking at just at that level is, for example, how do we have priests who are from away on our personnel committee that looks at our yearly transfers? So every year we have now tried to have especially priests from our religious orders who sit on our personnel committee. Because often we would move all of those priests around, kind of send an email to their local superior here in Canada or in the US, say, we want to move Father so-and-so to this parish, do you think that would be okay? Yes, no. So now, at least from the very beginning of the conversation, we actually have them at the table. That has been very fruitful for us, just also in building some of those relationships with the religious orders, because so many of our priests belong to religious orders here in the Archdiocese. So that's sort of something we've been trying to do. Our Archdiocesan Pastoral Council, how can we have priests who are maybe from different dioceses, different countries, how can they be a part of that, and a part of that voice with the lay people? So we've been trying over the last few years just to find different ways of including them and really kind of gleaning their gifts on these different sort of administrative committees and really consultative bodies to the Archbishop here in the Archdiocese. So in all of those ways, what we have also begun to look at, I look after what we call a mission leadership team. So this is now a group of priests and deacons who are looking after the areas that were often their own individual offices. So within mission leadership, I'm what we call the senior lead for this team that now looks after divine worship. I just happen to be the lead for that now. We look after the permanent diaconate, parish formation, which is sacramental prep and really a parish sort of ongoing formation, intergenerational catechesis. We also look after vocations. And so in this whole area here, we have been looking at clergy formation. What do we do for our priests and our deacons? We've just started our deacons. They now come once again to our deanery meetings. There was a period of time they didn't, but we have them coming back. But one of the things clergy formation has been looking at is we have put together what we're calling a clergy matrix. And so this is a document that has been produced by the mission leadership team. We kind of tested it with different groups of priests in the Archdiocese. One of the groups that we really tested it with are those priests that are often the naysayers. So we really kind of wanted to sit down with them, hear what they had to say, what do we need to improve, and then make some improvements. And so we've done that with different groups. We're kind of at the point now where we want to present it to the entire Presbyterate here in Edmonton. Part of that, though, is a document which is just looking at clergy formation. You know, we have the new formation document here in Canada. Some of the things that have been produced by the Canadian Federation of Presbyteral Councils, and really trying to say, what are things that we can do to strengthen the relationship with our brother priests? And how can we do that in a formational way? I have to say, I probably am one of the ones in the Chancery office who will send an email out to all the priests, you know. Very transactional. And so how can we be more relational in how we do a lot of these things? Over the last 2 years, as clergy, we probably met more often than we ever did before, but it was all on Zoom. So some of the priests love it because we could do an afternoon session on something. Some of the priests hate it because they want to be together. So it's been trying to find a balance. One of the things that we've been trying to do too is to be more proactive instead of reactive. And especially when it comes to issues around enculturation. Last year, of course, with the discovery of the unmarked graves in Kamloops, that was, of course, hit us in probably different parts of the country in different ways. One of the things that had come from a number of our priests is that they actually didn't understand the whole sort of residential school system. So what we did is we did a day-long Zoom session with the priests here in Edmonton, and what we did is we had Father Gary Labacan. Father Gary is an oblate priest. He's from southern Alberta, Indigenous. He has served here in Edmonton, and over the last several years has been in the Archdiocese of Vancouver. I don't know if there's anyone here from Vancouver. Anyways, he's now just back in Edmonton. He's pastor in Maskwacis, where Pope Francis visited during his visit to Canada here in July. So for Father Gary, we had him come and to share his experience for the morning. The experience of residential schools and also that of the Indigenous peoples. In the afternoon, we had Father Cristino Bovet. Father Cristino is a priest of the Calgary Diocese, great young guy. And he was also the lead liturgy coordinator for the papal visit here in Canada. So he spent the afternoon with us, and he shared his experience. And so we were able to talk with them, ask them questions about residential schools, the history. That helped all of our priests, but it helped especially those who are from away, because they didn't actually know what was a residential school and what did that mean, and those that lived or boarded in sort of the day schools. So a lot of those things we kind of change on the fly. If we have something planned and something else is coming up and we think that's an issue, we've been trying to adapt and to use different people. One of the things that we have really made use of when we have priests who are coming into the Archdiocese now is and by the way, that could be any priest, not just from somewhere in the country, is that we have them do a week-long assessment through Southdown. And so we just started that earlier this year, where any of our priests will come, they'll do this inventory with the different staff at Southdown. Then on the Friday morning, they'll have an exit interview. Usually myself or Archbishop Smith will sit in on those exit interviews. And it kind of gives a good picture for us about the priest that is coming in, and also it kind of gives them a good perspective on what we're looking for. And a lot of that is just based on safe environments we use here in Edmonton called to Protect, the Presidium program. So all of those things are new, and just how we're kind of trying our different ways to be able to meet some of the needs that the priests have brought forward, things that they're looking at that they need help on. So that's, in a sense, just sort of a quick overview of some of the things that we are doing here in Edmonton. I'm going to talk a little bit about this enculturation program that we do here in Edmonton. It's just been housed here, but over the last 20 years, it has been sort of refined a few times in the different groups that are involved. But I just wonder if there's any questions, or our brothers that are here, if there's anything that you'd like to share of your own experience, because to be honest with you, you're the best guys. And I'd actually like to take notes on some of the things that you do that we can bring here to our own fellows here in Edmonton, because I think there's always ways to improve. This is why I kind of think when we speak of enculturation, it's always kind of something that is progressing and moving forward. I ask seriously a lot of our priests who are from India, would you ever put together a pilgrimage to Kerala, where we could have not only our priests, but our parishioners go to Kerala? Because that's really where most of our priests are from. And we've had 2 priests that have done that in great success. And I think it helps us immensely. I would like to go one day. So if you ever plan a trip, let me know. But anything that you'd like to share?
I'd like to ask Father you talked to me about something last night about your experience going to Colombia, how you were introduced to your parish. I was wondering if you could go and give a little talk on that again to us right now. Can you go maybe to the front so we can be heard? Because I remember you gave a fantastic talk on what you experienced when you were in Colombia?
Yeah, we were talking about, how to prepare the people, not just the priests coming to Canada, but also the people who are receiving the priests. Because sometimes we focus on letting the priests know, oh, you're coming to Canada to this culture, and then after that, we send them to parishes. But the people didn't, have any preparation of who they are receiving and how they can help this person. And so sometimes there is this resistance from some people because they don't know what was coming. So I said, I worked in Colombia for 5 years, and before I arrived, the pastor where I worked spoke to the parishioners and said, listen, this guy coming doesn't know anything about Spanish. He doesn't speak Spanish, and he is coming to learn, and he's willing to learn. And so he was telling his parishioners, please, I encourage you and I plead with you to welcome him and help him to learn. And one of the ways you can help him to learn is attend the masses he will be celebrating. Because when he comes, because he doesn't have the language, of course he will not be able to speak well. And so the natural reaction will be to avoid the mass he'll be celebrating and go to the masses that you understand very well. And if you do that, he said, the priest will get discouraged and he would go, he may be tempted to go back. So he told them to attend the masses and to help teach me Spanish. And when I came, of course, I knew nothing in Spanish. And so what the people did, each mass I was celebrating, the parish priest announced, this is the mass Father Tochukwu is going to celebrate. And many people were going to that mass just to encourage me, just to help me. And after the mass, each family would take me out. They go to their family and they help me, teach me Spanish. I would have my dictionary. And that's how I began to, at least I felt welcome by the people, well received by the people, and then my openness began. And so that's how I got integrated in the community. And so that preparation for the people helped a lot, because I know that if they didn't do that, perhaps they would be very resistant to accepting me in the community. So that's where I was saying that here also in Canada, we know that the culture is different. For example, somebody coming from Africa, from Nigeria, and you come here, it's totally different. And some people may not really know you, and they don't understand your accent and all those things. So sometimes it will be very easy here to go to another parish. Everybody drives, and so they go to other parishes, especially if they are in the city. So that's where preparing the people's mind may help to create that atmosphere where the priest can flourish. And the people also can grow, because definitely, as you are saying, Father, this is a reality that is going to face the Canadian church from now on, because we don't have local vocations. And so we rely on we call international priests. I also have heard in our circle, among the international priests, in parentheses, some people say, when the early missionaries went to Africa, they went, or to other parts of the world, they went to evangelize. And they came there and they were accepted. And so they bore, they worked hard and sowed the seed. Now the seed is bearing fruit. And Canada and the Western Church is reaping from the fruit that was sowed by the early missionaries. And so it's something so positive for the church that we are able to come here to minister. It shows that those priests are religious who came to Africa or other parts of the world really did something marvelous for God. And so this is a blessing that is coming to the church in the West. And also to let the people know that, and know that this is the fruit of the labors of our early missionaries. And And so we thank God for it and we're open to receive that back. Also, some people have said that, you know, when the early missionaries went to Africa, wherever, they were called missionaries, not from our way, not the international priests. They were called missionaries because they went to carry out this message of the gospel. And so we, by virtue of our baptism, we are called to be missionaries. You know, so when we come here, we are not just, as you are saying, not just priests from our way, not just international priests. We are missionaries, and we are all called to be missionaries. Whether we are here, we are born here in Canada, or whether we come from other countries, we all come here to do the missionary work of Christ. And so some people felt that could be more inclusive and more respectful than just calling them priests from our way or international priests. Personally, I feel it's perhaps maybe semantics or words, but it's also some people are very sensitive to that. So that's my little.
Thank you.
Thank you, Louis.
Thank you. Not to put you on the spot, Father, I wonder when you came to Canada if you were received the same way as you were in Colombia in a parish, where maybe a priest would have said, you know, we have Father coming from wherever, and, you know, how do we receive him? Did that happen here for you too?
I was received well in Canada, and because when I came, there was one Nigerian priest who was my friend. So when I came, they sent me to spend some time with him, and so that helped me in landing because I stayed with him for a month or so before they sent me to the parish. So that helped me because he helped to, you know, like we were talking about mentoring and helping me to learn and explain to me the realities here about the culture and the way ministry is done here. So that helped me a lot.
Yeah, thanks.
And in our diocese, we try to do that too. When a new priest arrives, those from Nigeria, they send them to my parish sometimes or to the other parishes. They spend a week with me, and then they send them to another Canadian who is also a pastor. They spend a week with him, so they can get different experiences. Some parishes in the rural areas, some parishes in the city, and then after that, then they have a meeting like this one here, an enculturation meeting, and then invite people to speak with them from different aspects of Canadian culture and ways of ministry.
Perfect.
For me, that helped me in my landing.
Good, good. Anyone else? Please come up. I just wanted to say, come up, Father. One of the things here in Edmonton that we have to say, when we used to receive a priest, you know, we'd be like, okay, we're sending you to a parish that's 3 hours from Edmonton. Have a good life, you know, and off they would go. One of the things that came back to us is that that was not a good thing. So actually what we've now been doing, and when priests come, much like you experienced, Father, we actually have them stay for a month or so with a priest, maybe that they know from their diocese, religious order. And then one of the things that we have tried to do just over the last maybe 4 or 5 years, before I became vicar for clergy, is the first year that they're here, we have tried to keep them in the city as an associate with another priest here, just so that they don't think that their whole priesthood is like 3 hours from Edmonton somewhere on the prairies. So we've tried to connect them more here within the city, because often our priests, you know, they'll meet with their friends almost every week, because we send them away, and then their nearest priest could be an hour away. And often, you know, I kind of say I've been pastor of parishes in Edmonton, where, in the Archdiocese, where, like, unless you've got a purpose to go to that town, you're not going to that town, you know. So we've tried over the last few years to say, let's have the priest stay in Edmonton, at least as a start, just so that they can sort of meet some of the folks and build some of those relationships before we send them off to the city. Father, please, thanks.
Thanks, Father Paul. I would like to introduce myself because those priests, they know me already. I'm Father Thomas Nguyen from the Archdiocese of Regina, your neighbor. I'm glad we organized this section. And Father Paul is here with us. And I totally agree with you try to avoid the word international priest. It bothered me many years. Right now in Regina Diocese, we have different groups too. We have 18 Filipinos priests, 14 East Indian priests, 5 Africans, 7 Vietnamese. The reason I remember in my mind because I'm one of the personnel, I'm a member of personnel committee, so I send people, I send priests to the parishes. And right now, we have 4 priests, 2 from Africa and 2 from India, waiting for ladies to come to Canada. And we appointed them already, starting in August. And they still stuck in their own countries because of the visa. Now I'm going back to the word international priest. When people look at me, the parishioners, when they look at us, different faces, different culture, different skins, and there's an international priest right away, right? I guarantee 100% when people in the pews, when they see you stop the mass and say, oh, he came from somewhere or nowhere. And I was, some people, oh, where are you from, and whatever. It bothered me because I was trained in Canada here. Yeah. I spent 4 years in Mission, BC, Christ the King Seminary, and 4 years in St. Peter's in London, Ontario. 1 year internship with the Vicar General, and I was ordained priest in Canada, and I was named international priest. They called me international priest. It really bothered me at that time. And later on, when I was ordained, like I shared with you last time, there was only 2 Oriental priests in our diocese. And later on, 20 years later, and now we have, like I said, a whole bunch of different priests. So thank you for mentioning about that. And we in Regina Diocese, we divided. How do we define international priests? And they said, whoever were trained like me in Canada here, we call Canadian priests, and the rest we call international priests. Because it doesn't make sense, you know what? Because Father Michael Hogan, he just passed away 99 years of age. And he was not an international priest too, because he's from Irish. He's from Irish, and he came and from other country. Do we call him international priest? Couple priests from Holland, Netherlands. They came and stayed with us and was training and studying with us. And after they called me international priest, those priests, they said, I am not an international priest too. So that you remind me those stories, and now I'm going back to the culture shock, and yes, of course, we have to face that. Personally, I have to face, and you can tell. Even I was trained in Canada. I was in Canada here. Still culture shock for me. Back to 40 years ago, my first year in Canada here. Four major problems I have to face. First, weather. From tropical country to Canada country, culture. Weather. Secondly, culture. From rice to tomatoes to pasta, spaghetti, totally different. Food, the culture right there. And the way you talk, instead of bowing, waving, shake hands. Now shake hands in Canada, hugging. See, that's another culture shock. And thirdly, weather, food already. I think that's the 2 major. And then when you go to the parish, when you work in the parish, you have to face languages. I'm not English speaking at the beginning. I'm not English born, so hard for me to face that one either. So when I was in seminary of Christ the King, he helped me English too. Whoever, seminarians there, we help each other, and seminarians they help us. English speaking help it. I'm sure Bishop Joseph Nguyen, the same thing. He's my classmate, and we learn English from those guys, from seminary, like here. Yeah. So that's the way, and then now I see in our diocese, we still struggle with those. And I share with you, we have the group, speaking in our own groups, Vietnamese group, and next week I am going to face them. Next week we are going to have a study week in our diocese. And ethnic group will stay together. We cannot avoid that. That's why I brought it up yesterday and the day before. We cannot avoid that. Whenever we stay together, we talk Chinese, Vietnamese, Filipinos, Indians, and I hope in future we will find out. I know it's impolite when I speak in Vietnamese in front of you. You don't understand. It's impolite, but naturally, when we, for example, if Bishop Joseph Fung said, I speak Vietnamese with him right away, and he answered me Vietnamese. So that's a culture right there. I hope you understand that you have to face that. You have to face that too. That's the way you look at. I think that's all I can share with you. A few things because international is come up to my mind right away. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. If there's anyone else, please feel free to come on. Father, thanks for that. I studied admission as well, but I think I started just after you left, actually, back in the early 90s there. One of the things, but I don't know how you do this in your own dioceses, but I'd sure be happy to hear what you do is when a priest arrives here, we kind of give them $500 just for winter clothes. Like go out and buy some winter boots, winter coat, that kind of thing, because they're not coming prepared to be buying big winter coats like we are. I actually have to say in Edmonton, I don't know why we live in this forsaken place in the winter. It's why we all go to California a lot, or places of the south in the winter. But so many of the things that the priests are coming in, and part of that is not only just the weather, but the food and the language. When I was rector of St. Joseph's Cathedral Basilica here for the last 3 years, this sounds awful when I say this, but I went through 6 associate pastors in 3 years. I don't think I'm that rough on the guys, but we just really cycled them through the Basilica. I actually was very blessed to live with 5 priests from India. And it was a great, great blessing for me just to be able to get to know those guys. And they're all still here serving in the Archdiocese and in our hospitals. I have to say, though, I would always say, when you guys are going to cook, let me know, because I want to have supper with you. And, I'm not really great with spicy food. So I'd say to the fellows, is this spicy? No. Oh, come on, this is not spicy. Well, I'd have a little bit, and then, they could just see my nose was sweating, I was all red. And they'd be like, slapping their knees laughing at this, they're like, this is not spicy at all. Like, I felt bad for them because they probably cooked it as non-spicy, as they could again for me with something else. But even just to learn, and I used to always ask them, what is a parish like for you? We drive an hour to go celebrate Mass somewhere. What's it like for you? And just as they would share to me that sometimes they would be walking for a day or two, and I think, wow, that's a completely different experience than what we would experience. But just to hear how their parish structures were so marked in different ways than our parishes. And I think that's where we can learn a lot from one another. As Father mentioned, sometimes we kind of stick on our own language groups when we're all together, like on retreat or our study days. And I know that sometimes, I'll sit down at a meal with a group of the guys, and then it's like, oh God, Kavanaugh sat here, now we got to speak English. I kind of feel bad that I do that. I don't mean to do it on purpose, because I so often think, especially for our priests, if they have time to be together, sometimes I think too it's nice that they can speak Vietnamese together. Or, I was thinking, I mentioned all these other priests. There was a time here 20 years ago, we probably had 20 priests from the Philippines. We have 3 now, and 2 of them have been ordained for us. They did all their studies at St. Joseph's Seminary. They've been here most of their life. And I still often, like you experience, I hear people say, oh, they're from away. What are you talking about? They've been here their entire life, you know? I'm from Newfoundland, I could turn on an accent if I wanted to, you know? It is interesting that how you mentioned that, Father, that often, not only for our people, but our priests, we kind of classify priests from different places, but yet they've been formed here. Their families have been here for years. One of the funny things, one of our priests, that I'll say his name, Father Nilo Mekapinlak, he's from the Philippines. He was ordained, Cardinal Collins was still the Archbishop of Edmonton here. And so this would have been, Cardinal Collins, I think he left in 06 or 07, went to Toronto. It might have been 06 he was ordained. Father Nilo said to us, he said, you know, we have a part of our culture in the Philippines where we bring gifts. So as the gifts of bread and wine are presented at the ordination, could we bring gifts of fruit? And I said, yeah, that would be fine, of course. So anyways, I just thought it was like one basket. So believe it or not, I'm saying there, Bishop Craig Whitman, who was our chancellor at the time, and we were kind of all the priests were around the altar, and Archbishop Collins was sitting in front of the altar, and he received the gifts. Anyways, there was about 20 baskets. So I was the MC, so I'm kind of taking a basket and I put it from the altar, and I looked up at Bittman, and he's like, should I help you? Yes! And there was like 5 priests who just started grabbing baskets of fruit, and we had this all over the place. Like, Archbishop Collins was looking at me thinking, where are you from? Like, I was just like, I don't know what to do with the baskets. I was kind of a bit of a panic, you know, liturgically. So, but it was just things like that that I thought, okay, we need to do this. We need to do this. It was certainly a part of their culture, their life. It was an offering. Other than the fact that you had a lot of white priests not knowing what to do with these baskets of fruit, but we made it, you know? And I thought we need to do more of that. Even as a liturgist, you know, how do we culturate some of the aspects of what we do within the liturgy, right? There's always sort of that sort of, I don't want to say tension, that's not the right word, but how do we do that? So, Father, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. And our priests are probably the same here in Edmonton as I hear they are in Regina, so that's great. Anyone else, fathers? Please.
I'm from Toronto, so
Nice to see you.
yes. One of the things that I'm coming to realize is enculturation is not just about ethnicity amongst the different priests coming from outside, but also how do the priests relate to the younger generation. You know, because in terms of relationship, like there's a lot of youth ministries that are taking place, but what I've noticed is sometimes elderly priests tend to just kind of lay it on the younger priests, presuming that we know how to relate automatically to the youth. But I think that's something that also we need to be trained on. You know, how to dialogue with them, like, because they have their own language. And I think something that, you know, we think of in terms of French or German or whatever, but the youth also have their own genre, you know, their own kind of language and colloquialism, all that. So that's also, I think, something that we need to be trained in.
Before we started, I was talking to Rico over at the table there and some of the other priests. We were talking about Catholic schools, and I know Ontario and in Alberta we have publicly funded Catholic schools, and Saskatchewan or Manitoba, I can never remember who else it is, but it's not Manitoba. So when we kind of look at those questions, it is important because one of the great things I kind of miss not being in a parish is I often don't have the chance to go to the schools. You know, here just in the city of Edmonton, we have 103 Catholic schools. And so when we get into our school, some of our parishes have 12 Catholic schools associated with them. Some of our parishes have like one school associated with them, just the way the boundaries are drawn out at this point. But it is so true. I have to say, I see a lot of our older priests who actually connect better sometimes than I do with our young people in schools. And that is a sense of enculturation. It's a whole new world, I think, for our young people and the things that they're dealing with. And I must admit, I often don't see that, you know, on a daily basis, maybe where some of the priests that are in the schools or with our young people. I have to say, we haven't had often great success with a lot of our youth ministry programs. And I even hate to say the word program, but trying to engage our young people. So that really is a question that I think we grapple with. And often, I don't know if we do this a lot, often we don't maybe ask them, you know, kind of engage them in what they need or what they're looking for. World Youth Day is coming up next year in Lisbon, and one of our younger priests is going to kind of spear that, head that for us. And, you know, it's just, we almost seem to use World Youth Days often as a bit of a catalyst with our youth, and then it kind of dies out after. So, but I think we need to find a more wholesome way to engage our young people, absolutely. And thank you for that. Archbishop or Cardinal Collins, he ordained me a deacon and priest, so I was happy to see him here in Edmonton for the papal visit, because he ended up talking to my brother. My brother was helping out the Midwest, and he said, "Chris, I don't know if I can make it up these stairs, you know, for the procession." So I was, "Oh, come on, I'll help you up, Cardinal Collins." I'm looking from the altar thinking, what the hell is my brother doing with Cardinal Collins? You know, so anyways, I didn't get a chance to see him too much, but my brother had a good chat with him, and it was a great, great blessing. Anything else, fathers? Anyone else?
You were saying about liturgy, working with different, each culture has a, and one of the things I remember going to Bishop Marcel Danfous's installed it at the Sault Ste. Marie.
Right.
And then they have the smudge, and it's also when Tom Dowd came. They did that, so it was to show the liturgy in light of a culture that is together.
Yeah, and you know what? That has probably, I don't know what your own diocese is. I will say, here in Edmonton, that has become probably one of the priorities in the last few years. If I don't need to go off topic when I say this, Archbishop Smith has worked with a lot of the Indigenous leadership over the last several years, which I think has been very helpful in the last year and a half as we've been kind of facing Kamloops and things. We have always, here in the Archdiocese of Edmonton, on December the 12th, the Feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe, we have started celebrating that feast actually with Cardinal Collins in Edmonton, sort of as the feast for the Americas, and the Spanish parish was very much involved. That has since actually morphed into more of a day that we have celebrated with the Indigenous peoples. And so always on that feast day, no matter what day it is, unless it's like on a Saturday night, we've always had Mass where we have invited the different Indigenous communities in the Archdiocese to be a part of that. When we were first starting to plan that, we sat down with one of the Indigenous circles in the Archdiocese. And we were talking about different things, and one of the things that came up was the smudging. And we could not get consensus with the First Nations, with the bands, to say if we should do it or not. So as we were kind of discussing whether we should do that or when we should do it, I had brought up the fact that, you know what do they think about the use of incense? So anyways, we couldn't get consensus on that, so I thought, okay, you know what, we won't use incense at that Mass on that night. We always celebrated at the cathedral. So there was a lot of discussions about different things liturgically, what we would do. What we've now done for the last several years is we have had the smudging at the entrance of the cathedral as people would come in. And we would always have an elder there. Downtown here, and I'm sorry, I don't know if any of you saw yesterday Sacred Heart Parish of the First Peoples. Oh, thank you, yeah.
I saw it with Andrew last night.
Ah, perfect, okay. I was talking to Andrew, I sat down yesterday for an hour chit-chatting about different things, because he's our facilities lead and talking about churches and renovations. So Sacred Heart Church of the First Peoples, this was a parish that was designated, it's only just a few blocks away here. This was a parish that was designated by Archbishop Joseph McNeil as a parish for the First Peoples. And he kind of named that as sort of a national parish. And so they have got beautiful, beautiful ministries happening there. Father Suzai, who is from India originally, he is an oblate priest, and he's the pastor there. Father Mark Blanc is another oblate, and they are just doing some marvelous things there. They had a fire a few years ago in the sacristy. They had actually had some sweetgrass burning. It wasn't exactly put out properly. And then, of course, the sacristy started on fire. And then, of course, most of the church they saved, but there was such water damage. So they are now just ready, I say, we got them ready for the Pope, because the Pope came to visit Sacred Heart Parish. So that's a brand new, newly renovated church. Archbishop Smith dedicated the church again the Sunday before the Holy Father arrived here in Edmonton. So we had the Clark Construction who was doing the work. They were working 24 hours a day, 3 different shifts to get the church ready enough for the Pope to come in. So they should be hopefully moving in, and construction will be sort of wrapped up soon. They have really worked hard in the whole idea of enculturation and to bring some of the elements into the liturgy. And so they've done that. And they have folks who come from all over to celebrate Mass there. We often get so many people from the Arctic who come to Edmonton for doctor's appointments or surgery here in Edmonton. And when they're here, that's actually the parish that they often attend, is Sacred Heart Parish of the First Peoples. We've got a great connection. We've actually, over the last several years, done a twinning with the Archdiocese of Edmonton and the Diocese of Mackenzie-Fort Smith. Bishop John Hansen is there, he's a Redemptorist. I think he has 4 priests, maybe 5 priests in the whole Arctic. And so often, for example, at Christmas and Easter, some of our priests will go north to celebrate that. So there's always been some good things there that have happened in that sort of twinning. Bishop Mark Hagman, actually, when he was the bishop there, we began that years ago. So it's been very fruitful for us. But that too is really a way in which we look at some of the dynamics of our own faith communities, right? For example, we have a parish, we have a Syro-Malabar parish in the Archdiocese here in the city of Edmonton that belongs to the Syro-Malabar Eparchy in Mississauga. They bought their own church. They are just growing by leaps and bounds. The Syro-Malankara diocese, so they have a parish here in Edmonton. One of my former associates looks after that, and they're just growing by leaps and bounds. So there's some great things that are happening. We have a Vietnamese parish, actually, a Vietnamese martyrs parish. Father Tran is a Dominican. Surprisingly, though, last year I just closed our German parish. Our German parish is probably about 3 blocks from here. We just sold it off to an Orthodox group from India. So, that parish had been it was actually the first synagogue in Edmonton. It was a Catholic parish for 65 years. And I was administrator there. I'm a great administrator. I go and close parishes. It seems like all I do. Show up, hi, great to be with you. And then 6 months later, we're closing. So, for the German parish, now 3 or 4 generations out, the parish was so small. We have a Hungarian parish. I was administrator there. I thought we were close to closing it, and thank God I didn't, because there's a priest there who teaches at Newman College, and he's just rejuvenated the whole parish. So I thought, I'm doing something wrong as a pastor, you know, I should have got the ball in the door. So he's doing great things there. But we probably celebrate, I must say, we don't celebrate Mass in as many languages as maybe Toronto or Vancouver. Probably about maybe 16 or 17 different languages here in Edmonton. And we all have something to learn, really, from them and from the parishioners, from the people. Now, it is, 10:35. You're due for a break, right? Yeah. So please have some coffee. They're bringing coffee, so please have a break. Thank you very much, and thanks, fathers, for sharing.